Welcome to Defin, episode number 29. This is Vijay from Holland.
Yeah, it's Ray from Belgium. And we have the cowboy coder himself.
Is that my name?
Yeah,
like
maybe.
it.
I think so. I just made it up, but why not? I think I always imagine you as the Clojure cowboy lone coder, Zach. So tell me who you are anyway.
You know, I was trying to push that I'm the Bob Ross of Clojure, but I like that even more.
Then you need the fancy hairdo, right?
You guys know Bob Ross?
No.
I wasn't sure if
course.
Europeans knew.
Of course, everybody knows Bob Ross.
I don't know Bob Ross.
Oh, YouTube that dude, man. I'm him, first of all.
All right.
Except for Clojure. I don't know if that helps.
Not really, but give me one more clue.
So you're gonna make screencasts about things like, oh, let's just put the parentheses over there. There is nothing wrong with the parentheses.
Yeah.
Let's keep adding a couple of more there.
There you go. That's exactly it. Turn every mistake into a happy mistake. That's what he's all about. And all of my projects are happy mistakes. So
nice. So this is episode number 29 with Bob Ross of Clojure, Mr. Zach.
Right on. Right on.
Mr. Zach, the Mighty Oaks.
Yeah, Mighty Oak. First of all, I have a question about your domain name. What is Sekao?
It's Oaks backwards, dude. Come on.
Oh,
even
you
I know
got
that
it.
one.
But,
Come on.
No, but I thought OAKKS is OAKES.
Yeah. That's Sakao.
Because I kept typing I kept typing your name as Oaks, like oak tree. Like a 1,000-year-old oak tree.
Yeah. Well, you misspelt it both ways.
Oh.
Yeah. Oaks, my understanding is, the whatever American settlers that our ancestors, they used to spell it OAKS. But
Right.
then it just felt a little too gauche, a little too common person. So at some point they decided to add the E, a silent E, because silent E's are fancy.
Okay.
Right.
And so now it's OAKES. That's what I've been told.
Yeah.
But who knows?
That's nice.
Well, it's
No,
an
there
interesting
is a-
question there, though. Do you drop the E or do you drop the A? Nowadays.
Yeah.
Because actually, nowadays you say Oaks and it's just like OKES. So the E is still good there, Or do you say, I don't know, where are you going on that one?
I'm not going to be changing my name anytime soon, but
Okay. Especially after you register the domain. No.
Yeah, exactly. I can now.
That's now written into the internet forever.
Yeah.
But Sequoia is like Sequoia in some way. So it's a bit of a kind of tree reference
So
there.
it's still a tree.
I didn't even think about that. You guys are blowing my mind right now.
We know.
It's just 3 minutes in. I mean, you need to wait for another 30 minutes, and then it's going to be like fucking awesome and weird. And then you start seeing rainbows and unicorns. And it's just going to be amazing from now on.
What exactly have you taken before this episode? Just so I understand, VJ, where we're going to go now.
I always come prepared.
Right. Okay.
Okay, so let's talk about the stuff that. So Zach, Clojure, or anything else you want to talk about? How did you get into Clojure?
I guess I'm not sure how I originally found out about it, but back when I was younger, I was really into cryptography and peer-to-peer networking, all this like cyberpunk stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And I wanted to make something along those lines. And I found a Java library with all the crypto code that I wanted to use, but I didn't want to write Java. And I came across Clojure. I had never used a list before, but I decided, it works with Java, so I'll try it out. That project was called Nightweb. It ended up kind of crashing and burning, but I stuck with Clojure since then, and for the most part abandoned the the crypto stuff, and I got into what I'm doing now with like making beginner tools and games and stuff like that. But that's how I got into it. It was really just the JVM. A lot of other people they get into it other ways, but it was definitely that was huge for me is actually being able to work with Java code.
So was that the bouncy castle stuff? Was it, or was it some other more obscure crypto thing?
I think it was using Bouncy Castle, but the main project was called I2P, which is a anonymous network, similar to Tor.
All right, okay.
It's like less well known. It's for the hipsters who you want to use something that no one knows about. You can use I2P.
I think that's your shtick, though, isn't it? You know.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I'm a hipster. Look at me. I got a mustache and a baseball cap on. But it's true though. I do like to try different things. I don't really, like I said, I don't really do the crypto stuff very much anymore.
Right.
But I mean, I fell in love, and I've been using Clojure for 5 years now and haven't gotten tired yet. So that's basically how I started with it.
But before that, though, I mean, with the crypto stuff and all the cyberpunk stuff, so give us a bit more about that, because that sounds, I mean, you didn't stick with it, but what brought you to that?
Wait, are you Satoshi? Let's get it out of the way first.
I am not Satoshi. I'm not Satoshi, but
that's what Satoshi would say, though.
Exactly.
I worked for the NSA. I for the National Security Agency, and I don't know. At the time, I was fascinated with that subject, and this was before Snowden, so it was before the NSA was, something that everybody knew about. They used to call it no such agency. That's what they used to call NSA. But now everybody knows it because all the revelations. But I don't know. That was part of the reason why I was really into it. But I think after a while I just got burnt out, and I don't want to fight the man. I want to pursue other things now, and so I that's part of the reason I abandoned it. It was just Nightweb really burnt me out,
right?
Because I really poured a lot of effort into that, and the nice thing is that it got me into Clojure, but it was a happy accident, same thing we were just talking about.
Yeah,
like you're the Bob Ross of
hell yeah
of Clojure. But why beginners tools though? I mean, it seems like there is, if I see your list of projects, there is IDE, and these kind of things seems to be like extremely I don't know. I would never start an IDE project because I know how monumental it sounds. Actually, even starting an editor itself is like, oh fuck, that's gonna be too much work.
Yeah.
Why did you pick this stream?
Well, originally it was because I after the crypto stuff, I got into teaching, and I wanted to have a good tool to teach Clojure, and I think both Emacs and IntelliJ are a bit too much for a beginner, and I mean like a ground level beginner, like someone who has no programming experience. Both of those are very powerful tools, but I think they can be overwhelming. So that's how I started getting into it. Also, I'm weird in the way I write code. I'm my biggest user, by the way, of my tools. I use all of my own stuff, even though they're beginner tools. And the reason why is that I'm not one of those people who sees programming as an art form, like people who actually care a lot about coding style, and these are the same people who also tend to love tweaking their tools. They just love everything about getting the absolute best setup and just tweaking it constantly. I know this
sounds
sounds
about that. BJ, you better hide your Emacs config file immediately.
Yes.
Perfect example. Me, like, honestly, when I accidentally open up Emacs, I don't even know how to close it. I'm not even joking.
You have to turn the machine off. Yeah, that's it. Set it on fire. Actually, just put it on fire. Throw it out the window. That's what I always do.
Yeah, I was never like that. I even before Clojure, I was always like, I look at programming as a sledgehammer that I whack my problems with. I don't think about it in terms of an art form. I just hammer at my problem, and often it's ugly. Often I duplicate code, and it's just like, don't look at any of my projects. It's often quite gnarly, but that also means I always hated configuring tools. It just drove me nuts, because in my mind, it had nothing to do with the problem I was trying to solve. It was just like, just give me Notepad or text edit or something, and I might not even notice that there's not syntax highlighting. And I was always that kind of person, and so beginner tools were actually perfect for me too, because they're all about, you don't need to configure it. You just launch it and use it. And that was the case with Nightcode. The whole idea of it was, you don't have to actually do any configuration. You just download it, you launch it, and everything's already set up. So I might be weird in that respect, but that's one of the reasons I did it, is really just for myself. And, if it helps other people, then all the better.
Yeah. I think that's a nice pitch for this episode. I say, oh, Zach Oakes, everybody, Clojure programmer. And then from Zach's voice, it's like, don't look at my code.
Yeah, please don't. I'm embarrassed about all of it.
Yeah, actually, when you were doing your screencast, I was looking at some of your code and I was thinking, shit, there's a bug right there. This guy, what is going on? I'll have to talk to him about it on the cast, but yeah. We'll talk about it afterwards. I don't want to shame you in public. Oh, I already have. Okay, shit. Okay.
My users are well aware of what my bugs are like. They happen early and often, as they say. So,
like, with all the methane with cows and everything, bugs are necessity these days. I mean, we need to live with bugs now. So you can't just say this is for the planet.
Yeah.
So keep more bugs in the code. That's nice.
So that might also, go ahead.
What are you talking about?
Okay, what I'm talking about is that now people start eating bugs now.
Oh, I see.
Instead of eating cows.
Right. Okay.
Jesus Christ.
I wasn't even trying to follow it. I was just pretending you didn't say anything.
Is it like, I think it was like Bugcoin or something, It's like...
That's true. You don't give me ideas, because last week I saw crypto kitties and I keep thinking, oh, maybe I should make crypto, I don't know, puppies or something. And then have you read about crypto kitties already?
No, I've never heard of it.
That's like Ethereum based online kittens that you can buy, like collectibles. So everybody gets a unique
makes perfect
whatever
sense.
The fuck that is.
Like Pokemon for
yeah, exactly
Ethereum.
like
Say
Pokemon,
no more.
but digital. Yeah, but digital.
Wow.
That makes total
and
sense.
the biggest kitty, not biggest, but the Genesis Zero kitty is almost like I think 6 Ethereums, 6 Ether thingies, and that would be around, I don't know,
$2,000,
2,000 euros or something. Yeah,
wow.
for a digital shit. Anyway, coming back to Clojure now.
I'm lost.
See, I told you this is just 15 minutes in, and then you're just flabbergasted in the first 5 minutes. I told you in 15 minutes we don't know where we'll be going by the time we finish.
I think we should just call
we'll introduce
out,
Clojure coins.
Start again. Right. Anyway, just before we go back, just a little bit more of the background, though. So Zach, I ask people. I don't always ask people. Whatever. We sometimes ask people, like. Normally, Clojure is like the zenith of all programming languages. It's just a beautiful language, and People say, "Oh, it doesn't matter what the programming language is," but fuck off, it does matter. It really matters, and I'm sorry, and I'm not sorry actually. I love Clojure. I love coding in it. I think it's a beautiful language. I enjoy it. I'm proud to be programming in Clojure. I like the fact that we can do it. People knock it, but whatever. My point is that some people code in shitty languages to begin with, like Java or PHP or whatever. What about yourself? What's the worst ever programming language you've used? And maybe you don't agree with me, by the way. Maybe you think, Clojure is just a thing, but, I think you'll love it as well.
It's hard to say. I use both of those quite a bit. The thing I always liked about PHP, which is a sentence I never thought I would start with, is...
This is going to be online forever.
No, it's PHP, not PCP. Okay, remember that.
But when I was about 17, 18, my first foray into web development was PHP.
Sure.
And I didn't choose it. It just I just thought that's what every website was built with. And I got a DreamHost account. And I think they still exist. They're
I host with them actually.
Do you really?
Oh, you do?
Still.
Okay.
Yeah,
and
I've been paying them since 1998 or something.
Yeah, they've been around forever. And
exactly.
And what I loved is I was a stupid kid, but I could just write a little PHP file and go to their little web FTP thing, upload it, and then hit the right URL, and it would just run. We don't actually have that right now. Like with Clojure, there's no similar beginner experience there. That's something I'd like to work on. But now part of that is because CGI style web apps are just inherently simpler. But I think PHP in particular was so good at that. It was like it was built to run inside Apache, and it was such a simple mental model. And maybe it's a bit anachronistic now, because it's all about single page web apps and whatnot. But I loved that about it. And the language itself was kind of ugly. There's some inconsistencies and different naming and stuff like that. I don't actually care about that. It's the same thing like people who complain about the inconsistent naming in Clojure. There is some kind of weird naming conventions, the any question mark, that sort of stuff. I just personally, I don't really care. It's just hard to get worked up about. It's probably the same reason that I use Notepad. I just don't care about this stuff at all. So when you say bad languages, to me, if it's just ugly in sort of a surface sense like PHP, I don't actually mind. Now, my first language was C++, and that was bad in a different sense because, it was very easy to mess up and really too low level for a 15-year-old to be, to be messing with it. It's just, at least for me at the time, But I don't have strong feelings against any programming language. It just doesn't... But I totally agree with you, though, that it does matter. Like, it's not like it doesn't matter. Programming languages definitely do matter. Clojure has absolutely, totally changed my career. It's not even just a hobby anymore. And so, I definitely think it matters. But the things that I hate about programming languages are not surface level things like naming conventions. It's more like, what I now understand to be things like immutability, that kind of stuff. But I still miss the simplicity of PHP in that one sense, because I'm so focused on beginner tools that I would love to have that kind of experience for Clojure.
I think you absolutely nailed it there. I mean, this is one of the biggest complaints I think of Clojure is that beginner experience isn't as good as it should be. It's not just like slipping off a log. I think the work that you're doing really will help that as well. So kudos. But yeah. So just a small question back to your points there. Why did you walk up to C++ as a 15-year-old? I mean, that seems like That seems like you're just like walking into a door or something, and then you should just walk away or see how you can open it and get a better language. I mean, what happened there?
Yeah, well, I didn't choose it, unfortunately. I was in 10th grade, and it was a class that I took.
Man, that's a cruel teacher.
Oh yeah, absolutely. But the funny thing, I mean, in the U.S., programming is still not a standard thing that is taught in all high schools. I was lucky enough in my high school to have at least some kind of programming, but they don't typically have actual programmers teaching it.
Right,
It's usually math teachers.
Yeah.
And so it's not always ideal, but I was lucky just to have something. So it was a half year C++ class, and I don't know, I was not the best at it, but I kind of liked it. And then my senior year, I had a full year Java class.
Right.
And once again, wasn't the best, but I thought it was interesting. I was not good enough at math and physics to actually major in computer science. It's just, those subjects just didn't work well for me, but I taught myself in my free time and eventually convinced someone to let me write code for money. It took a long time, but it eventually happened.
Awesome. Yeah. I think many programmers are like that, it's very, very, especially in when in the sort of 90s, it wasn't so easy to get into college. The science wasn't so well developed. And I think even now, if I look at computer science, I didn't follow a standard route either. And I just think it is fucking boring, doing all these like maths algorithms all day, to me, I don't give a shit about that, I want to move pixels on a screen, or I want to...
Yeah. Well, that's how I am. I think that we just need a separation. Like, there's room for the more abstract part of this discipline.
Yeah.
But there also needs to be like a separate curriculum for software engineering, which is, not as mathy, but focused on building things. And I would have loved that. But it did not exist where I went to school. So I just taught myself. So.
Yeah, what I find with my son is, he's still here, he's probably listening to some of this, is that, they're, I mean, he's 13, but they're doing like these robotics things at the school. And that seems really nice, because then they can sort of feel, all right, I'm moving this robot around, and, it's a bit like the kind of logo thing that was available to some people. I never saw it when I was at school, but I know some people had it, and it's kind of a legendary bullshit thing now. But robotics seems to be a thing which is getting into schools everywhere now, which is really good, because I think that makes people feel like they can do something for real,
Yeah. Oh, yeah. No, that sounds perfect for younger people, especially. Yeah. I hope that happens in the U.S. as well. So if you guys are getting it, then probably 20 years from now we will too. This is awesome.
Oh my God, the U.S. You know what US means, when you write US on something?
I thought it just meant us. Does it stand for something?
Yeah, it means useless, actually. It really does. I mean, that's an army saying, actually. If you write US on something, it means it's totally fucked. It's kaput.
I think you will be our last US guest.
Well, I think you're going to all burn in flames pretty shortly anyway, so...
Assuming if anybody is listening from the US, I mean, you'll be the last guest, that's okay.
Have you guys been to the US?
Of course, yeah.
Okay.
No, I've never been to the US.
You haven't?
No.
Oh man, well, no. I just went to Europe for the first time this year for Clojure D. I felt like such a fish out of water. Some things were similar, but goodness, like. I already told you earlier that the train system blew my mind.
Yeah.
That was awesome. I had never actually ridden on a train before at all until
wow.
I went there. Yeah. We don't ride trains here, man.
Oh, Jesus Christ.
Okay. I mean, I come from India, and then we have a pretty Well, we have a shitty railway system, but we have a railway system. We need to go from one place to the other.
But you should come.
I remember
sitting. I mean, there's an experience here that you can't get in Europe, like the cross country road trip. Okay, you need to do that.
Yeah.
A lot of Europeans will come here and they'll like rent a car.
Yeah.
And do go to Grand Canyon, shit like that. You got to do that.
Yeah.
And
I mean, I want to, because I'm not sure if my skin gradient is convenient enough to get into the US easily. So that's one of the shit that I hate about traveling. So you never know.
Well,
I'm assuming they have some sort of a gradient card to check my Pantone code or something.
Is, go to Canada first and then sneak in through the northern border, because we don't really defend that very much. It's just like too long.
That is a surefire way of.
Just
I think we because we are offending all of them anyway. So I'm thinking if I get into from US from the north, they'll throw me into Mexico because you look like a more
straight
from
through.
that guy.
Just straight through. Just flush
exactly.
Through.
Just pass through.
Right.
But I would like to travel at one point. Let's see in the next 6 years what happens, and then everything will be cheaper in the US, assuming
right on.
Trump will finishes it.
Yeah.
And no. Anyway, I do not wish bad things for big economies.
What are we talking about? I don't even remember.
We were talking about like going to different countries and stuff, and the US being a piece of shit because they don't have robotics, and you're 20 years. Everything. When I was growing up, the US used to be like the place where all the modern things happened, and now it seems like it's the other way around. It seems like the US is like a third world country almost. I go there, and I'm not joking about that even. I mean, it hasn't got a railway system. The long delays at the airport.
Come on, they just launched the
roads are all falling to pieces. The bridges are all falling to pieces. All of their infrastructure is crap. But
there are Teslas.
They don't know how to make decent coffee. I mean, honestly, everything about that country is just like now I'm a grown up. I realize that actually
we have pretty good beer. We have pretty good.
I mean, I come from Belgium, so
have you ever had
I don't think so.
Compared to Belgium,
you need to try Yingling. It is.
It's
my home state's beer.
All right, okay.
And, I don't know. I like it here. Fuck you guys.
This is the best episode ever. Finally, people are opening up to us.
Oh Christ! This is awesome.
And telling them the real things.
This is what we started this podcast for.
Exactly. Finally, this is the peak episode. On the 29th episode, we finally hear people's voice. Fuck you guys.
Respect, Zach. Respect. I think what you said, what everyone else who's listening actually wanted to say.
Yeah, that's true. And this is coming from Bob Ross of Clojure. Like the
I'm the spokesman.
The happiest guy ever.
I'm the spokesman for all of your unsatisfied listeners. just conveying their thoughts to you.
Much appreciated.
All the two of them. Thank you.
Actually, we do occasionally get Americans coming in and sort of, being a bit dissatisfied. But fuck them, yeah?
Yeah, actually, fuck everybody.
But they're normally the people who are like, oh, keep the politics out of this. It's like, you started it.
Exactly.
You elected that guy. We didn't start it. All right, anyway, look, forget it. Right, let's go back to Clojure.
Yes. No, before going to
all the horrible
Clojure.
things are out of the way now.
I have no, not yet.
Oh, Emacs.
Or maybe not. Yes, obviously. But I was taking a look at your list of projects, and I was wondering what is your experience with Rust, because you had a little small experiment, or I'm not sure if it was an experiment. You did some Rust IDE as well, so you played with Rust.
Yeah.
And what is your opinion about Rust?
Well. And part of it is that because C++ was my first language, I always wanted to go back a little bit to low-level programming because it's kind of been a while. And also, to be honest, there was about a 6-month period where I had what you might call a crisis of confidence with Clojure.
Right.
And part of it was because I had to work on a Clojure code base that someone else wrote.
Oh my god!
You know, Clojure is awesome until you have to like read someone else's Clojure, and you're like, "What the fuck is this?" and this was before Spec came out, so there wasn't really any answer to the whole question of how could we document what's coming into this function, what's going out.
Yeah.
And I mean, I had a bit of a crisis. I played with Rust. I made a IDE, of course, because what else am I going to do?
Obviously.
And I don't know. It was a fun 6 months of just messing around. But ultimately, I mean, I started to miss the REPL. There's no real REPL with Rust. And also, honestly, the kind of software that I want to write, Rust is not necessarily the best choice for. You know, Rust will be great if you've got resource constraints, or if it's something that's very safety critical. You know, if you're programming someone's heart monitor, I hope no one lets me do that because they're dead. You know, they're gone. And so I just started realizing.
But how difficult can it be? It has only two states, on or off.
Yeah. Yeah.
No one let him do it either. Okay, that is not the right model.
Okay. and so it was a fun excursion, but for the most part, I just realized Clojure is a good fit for my brain. I really like to play around and experiment with code, and the REPL is the perfect tool for that.
Yeah.
And so I went back to Clojure with a fresh perspective. I definitely will still reach for Rust for certain things, but I haven't really found a whole lot of excuses recently. And with Spec now, it's really like filled in that one gap that was in my mind. It's actually I just think it's one of the most exciting things to happen since Clojure was released. It's still blowing my mind, like even today, because I finally started using it to actually parse or destructure data structures. Because previously I was only using it as a runtime checking thing.
Yep.
And it just blew my mind. It just I actually feel really lucky that I can use something like this. So I'll probably play around with Rust some more, but that's really the story there. It was 6 months where I dated somebody else and then went back to the old yeah.
Just a quick question on that. The funny thing about Rust to me, I mean, maybe I've got this wrong, and I get some things wrong occasionally, apparently. But
occasionally,
this is not just you guys telling me this, by the way. I've got a family here. They're keeping it real. But
yes.
What should I say? The thing about Rust is it comes from Mozilla, doesn't it? And it's like the idea is that next generation browser will be written in this shit piece of crap. Why isn't anyone writing some proper browser stuff, in Clojure or something more dynamic? Because it seems totally annoying to me that we have this like browser that's written in a crap language, C++ or C, and then it has to run this other crap language, JavaScript, on top of it. It just seems like the whole infrastructure of the internet is built on shit. I mean, am I wrong, or is that just like, well, it is what it is, so let's just deal with it?
Well, Clojure runs on top of these platforms, which means you're saying that it's running on top of shit too.
Well, it is, but I mean but it's like.
I mean, the thing that I love about Clojure is the fact that there is a very strong streak of pragmatism to it.
Sure.
Yeah. If you want to reinvent the world from the ground up, you're not gonna write a hosted language. You're gonna do something that is completely ground level, boil the whole ocean, and it'll be gorgeous. I'm sure it'll be gorgeous and useless, but
Yeah.
I love the fact that Clojure not only embraces these, you might say ugly platforms, but it even doesn't try to hide them. It actually lets the details seep through it. Like with both the JVM Clojure and Clojure script, it doesn't try to hide the underlying platform, which is fairly unique. A lot of the other hosted languages, they try to pretend like that underlying platform doesn't exist, and they try to wrap it and hide it behind some layer. And I actually think that's a mistake. I'm convinced now that it's a mistake to do that. I mean, it's not just that it's a performance hit. It's that you're constantly creating this leaky abstraction that you're going to have to continuously maintain as the platform changes underneath it. So I don't actually mind the whole embracing the ugly world thing. I think that's like a big part of how Clojure works. And I think the world itself is ugly. Instead of making oh God, I don't want to go back to the old discussion. Please.
No, okay.
That's okay.
But I love that philosophy a lot. That's my whole point.
I agree with you.
So.
No, I mean it's not about just ugliness, right? It's the way the world is. I mean it's not about beauty or ugly. It's inconsistent. That's how the world is.
Yeah.
I mean, you can't put platonic solids onto the world and then say, everything is going to be like this.
Right.
Then you try to fit everything into these categories. So that's what I think the dynamic languages shine through this kind of thinking.
Mm-hmm.
But I think the actual the example. I don't know if you were thinking about this example, Zach, but the example of where they try to not have that is Elm, where they say, okay, we're not going to leak the JavaScript world into Elm. Everything is typed.
Yeah.
And we're going to make everything hard, and we're going to have these like hard barriers on the input and the output side, and you're going to have to maintain that. And that, I think Elm is very nice in you can do some nice things with it in itself. But I think that, to your point, it's one of the things that I think Rich was saying at the beginning was that it's an island type mentality. You're going to stay on the island, and if you're on the island, that's great. You can have a nice life on the island. But you're going to miss out on a hell of a lot of infrastructure. You don't have modern plumbing. You don't have running water. You don't have sanitation. Or you do, but it's going to take you a shitload of time to make it all happen. Yeah.
No, that's a perfect example. I can't claim to be that knowledgeable of Elm, but that's definitely the picture that I got as well. You have to wrap everything, and. It looks like they're not really trying to utilize things like React. They're trying to write their own thing that does the same thing. And that's kind of an example. I mean, maybe your thing ends up being better, but you're on your own now. And and ultimately, what that means is you're going to have a big project with lots of hairs in it, and all of the parts that interact with JavaScript, you're going to end up just writing in JavaScript because it's easier than going through this layer that you are forcing people to go through. And how is it better to make people write more JavaScript? It's a terrible idea. I love
good call.
Like with Clojure script, it's just as easy to call a JavaScript function as it is to call it from JavaScript, and that's such a incredible thing that you take for granted. But that's part of the reason why is that it's just a philosophical difference.
All right, so I think after like 40 minutes, we've probably done the background check.
Yes,
your old friends at the NSA might have requested. Right. Okay. So cool. So actually, there was a project that you and I talked about I had a small conversation about, was Paren Soup, that got me kind of put you on my radar at least. And I think we will come on to these editors in a bit, but tell us a little bit about Paren Soup, because I kind of am amazed by Paren Soup. Just everything is like from the beginning purely 100% Clojure script. It's not using all the other stuff like Code Mirror and things like that. So what was this?
Yeah.
What was your thinking there?
Well, I don't know if I was thinking anything. I mean, at the
it's instinctive. You're coding instinctively. I love it.
Yeah. I mean,
that's the Zen.
My initial goal was that I noticed that all of these blog posts, okay, David Nolan, all these people with Clojure script blog posts where they need to show code, they're always using Code Mirror.
Yeah.
And, Code Mirror is fine, but it actually, it has very basic support for Clojure script. It's very simple syntax highlighting and whatnot. I knew you could do better if you actually wrote it in Clojure script. I mean, the great thing about Lisp is it's really good at reading itself.
Right.
It's like it knows its own syntax, and I knew you could do interesting stuff like not just rainbow parentheses, but things like an insta-REPL, which previously was only available in Lighttable. And so I built this out, and the first version was horrible. It was almost unusable because on a fundamental level, the way it worked is it uses tools.reader to parse the code every time you type something. Well, if you break the syntax, you type an open paren, but there's no close paren, tools reader says, I'm not dealing with that. Screw that. Yeah. And so everything breaks. And I was scratching my head. I didn't really know how to solve this. And then shortly afterwards, Sean LeBron came out with Parnfer.
Right.
And it was just like manna from heaven. It just came down right there on a silver platter. And I integrated it into paren soup, and it fixed the problem completely because Parnfer, it does that. It instantly matches parens. And now all of a sudden the AST was almost never breaking, and so now we had this nice little browser-based editor with all these cool features that Code Mirror will never have, and it actually worked now, and I thought that was going to be it, but eventually I realized when I rewrote Nightcode that I could actually put it into Nightcode. And that's what I did. Nightcode has a little web view that is running paren soup in it.
Right.
And ever since then, I've made a whole bunch of other IDEs that also use paren soup. So now that one little library is feeding into like 4 different projects, and they're all using the same paren soup editor. So paren soup ended up paying off. But that was the original idea. It was just like make something better than Code Mirror that was just focused on Clojure syntax, and that's it.
Yeah. Maybe you should have called it paren turtle soup, because then it would be paren turtles all the way down. Yeah.
Paren turtle? Oh. Well, with your accent, it took me a while to figure out.
No, it's really good. It's really good, really cool. And so one of the things that we got a little bit of feedback about was like making sure that we explain some of these tools before we start talking about them. So I think that was good for paren soup. So you mentioned this other tool, the Nightcoder. Yeah. So can you explain a little bit about that one?
So what is that about?
Well, it's a very simple IDE for Clojure, and it's very it follows a very mainstream IDE design, kind of like IntelliJ. You got your project tree on the left, you got your big editor pane, you got the build pane underneath, and it was my first attempt at making a good beginner Clojure tool, and I still maintain it. In fact, I released a new version last night from a hotel room. Long story, I won't get into it, but
it's very Zach though.
Yeah, and I honestly though, like since then, I've been attacking this problem from different angles, and I don't even really recommend it anymore as your first taste of Clojure.
Okay.
Because it still requires some setup. So Nightcode, it'll fork off a separate process to run line again or boot commands, but you still need to have a JDK installed or something like that.
Right.
There's still some setup, and so ever since then, I've been trying to reduce the number of steps to just collapse it down. So I tried making an online thing, nightcoders.net, and that obviously reduces the steps, right? You just go to a website, you log in, and you start coding.
Is that where you run the host? You run the server side?
Yeah. I run it. It's on a German host because they're really cheap, but just need to keep in mind,
which one?
Germany has certain rules about what you can put on there. But
what the hell are you going to put on there the Germans won't like? Come on.
Compared to the US.
Civilized Clojure programmers here,
Yeah.
Maybe some of the Charlottesville guys, I don't know.
I have not had any problems so far, but Nightcoders was my attempt to make it, even fewer steps.
Right.
But it's limited in that you can only do Clojure script. You can't do server-side code because I don't want to run arbitrary code on my server. So I started rethinking the problem, and recently I released LightMod, which is a client-side tool, and it lets you do full-stack Clojure. So you can do server-side code, client-side code, all in one package. And now I feel like this is my ideal. This is the thing I've been trying to build.
Right.
It's in that sense more powerful because it lets you do actual full stack Clojure, and it doesn't require any other installation step. You don't need a Java runtime installed because it has a private Java runtime built in. You don't need any boot or line again installed anywhere because it runs everything internally. It doesn't even launch a separate process. It actually runs your web app inside of its own process. So that's what I try to point people to now.
Let's just back up a little bit there, Zach, because you blew through that one, which is great. But I think it's like, whoa, all right, full stack. Let's just take it apart a little bit by bit because I think it's a pretty mind blowing project. So how do you approach it again?
LightMod.
Yeah, LightMod. So what do you do as a user of LightMod? What are you?
It's a client side tool. So you download it.
Yeah.
There's a version for Mac OS 10, Windows, and
so it's
Linux.
like a big executable, a big ball of goo.
Yeah.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. And when you launch it, it shows a window. Looks like an IDE, maybe a beginner IDE.
Yeah.
But unlike Nightcode, which is more of a traditional looking IDE, like I mentioned before, it looked kind of like IntelliJ. This keeps everything in one window. So it actually even has a little web view built in. So when you open up a project, you can have your web app on the left and then your code editor on the right. And all that is built in. It's like really vertically integrated. I don't know if any it's hard to talk about this because there's actually, as far as I know, nothing that's similar in other languages. Something that this vertically integrated. It basically bundles your back-end code compiler, your front-end compiler, ClojureScript, a text editor, a web view. It's just like shoves them all into one thing. It's like the opposite of the Unix philosophy. It's just like everything in one.
So it's kind of like an Emacs replacement for VJ.
Yeah. It is a kitchen sink. The only thing I don't have is an email client. That's one thing that Emacs
too bad.
has. But it's a similar idea. I think that vertically integrated tools are better for beginners. So that's why I built that. But anyway,
this is also targeted for the beginners, right? Because once you finish the application, so to speak, you need to find a way to. This is a learning tool, or do you think this is more like a production level thing that you can?
I'd say it's a learning tool.
Export from.
Yeah, and I provide a way to export your project later when you're ready to use like a normal build tool. So it's definitely a beginner tool, but I think this is a piece to the puzzle we were talking about. Like, how do we get Clojure to where PHP was 15 years ago? Like, how can we
slightly better? Just
yeah. And I think Lightmod is part of that solution. It's not the full solution because I still don't provide a way to deploy. But the editing part, that experience is, I think, like about as easy and pre-configured as possible. The deployment part is still interesting. I need to work on it, but that's what I want to do. I want to get my 15-year-old self to use Clojure instead of PHP.
Right.
But if I could talk to him now, I'm not sure I would recommend Clojure.
Yeah.
And that's what I'm trying to fix.
That is stellar. Yeah. So in terms of like the actual thing that you download, the thing that you get, your executable. So you say it's got like a web server and all this kind of stuff built into it. Is that something which anyone can play with, or is that like all completely opaque and all people can do really is just like use the editor? How much configuration is going on there? You know, if you actually want to take a deeper dive into it, I mean, what can you do with it? Or are you kind of saying, look, this is off limits, and you know, you do the editing and I'll do the rendering and that kind of stuff? And
no, there's some restrictions for sure. You do give up some flexibility for the sake of, you know, simplicity.
Sure.
So you do have to use HTTP kit, which is that's just built into Lightmod. You don't get to choose that, but you do have quite a lot of control over the server. You can use whatever Ring middleware you want, and you have almost total control over the server side code. So you can create your own routes. You know, you can create, you can use Senti to do WebSocket stuff. So there's a lot of stuff you can do, but yeah, there is some limitations. You have to give up some control for the sake of for the ease of use.
And you also have the database thing embedded in it, right?
Yeah, there's a database template. I tried to provide a bunch of templates that just showed different.
Because I was just playing with the tool. I just downloaded it, and it has the very nice way of saying, okay, if you want to build a small basic app, or if you want to connect to the database using H2, so that's a really nice way to get started, actually.
Yeah, I mean, I always learned well when I saw small sample projects, and the whole idea of code examples. This is a good segue, by the way, in a Dynadog.
Yeah. Of course.
And code examples, I think, are a much better way to learn than trying to read some dry technical description, you know, in a doc string, in anything else. Actually watching the code do something. This is even more important for Clojure, being a language centered around the REPL. So that's a lesson that I learned myself just from learning Clojure. You know, I learned most of it just from messing around the REPL. And so to make a good documentation generator, I think you need to incorporate that into it. You know, it can't just be, okay, I'm going to show you the doc string and maybe the source code, and that's it. Having an interactive example embedded in that, I think, is the perfect way to like have way better documentation than other languages. I think like too often people they think about documentation in a static way, because static languages, that's what they do. You know, here's the function, here's the arguments, here's the doc string. I think if you want to do a better job than they do, you need to not think the way they do. You need to actually take advantage of what's actually unique about Clojure.
You know something, Zach? What that presentation reminded me of was like, I mean, maybe I'm sort of having a laugh here, but the Brett Victor talk. I don't know if you're a fan of Brett, but you know, he was.
I've heard of him. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, but he's all about that. You know, he's all about that kind of like the interactivity, the feedback loop, you know. But actually, if you ever watch some of his demos, they're all awesome, you know. And it's. But I wonder whether he's catfishing the shit out of us because he's not releasing his code, you know. Where are his tools, you know? I mean, he's showing us what's possible, but it really sounds like, it really feels to me like, 10 years on, where is this shit, you know? And now he's off somewhere else, whatever, you know, in this dynamic land stuff. But what you're doing is really like essentially realizing and kind of like bringing to life many of the things that he spoke about when he was inventing on principle. You know, it's like, how do I get that loop going? How do I get that feedback loop going? And this seems, it's like the reality of that dream is what you're bringing to us. Maybe that's too high praise, but you know, I think you're absolutely, you're doing absolutely great work, you know.
I actually think you guys need to praise me more. Okay, you're not really doing enough.
That's true. We went off the rails a bit earlier on, that's for sure.
But I've seen the talk that you mentioned, and yeah, I mean, it definitely had an effect on me, and it's the same reason I returned to Clojure after using Rust. I was like, I need that interactivity.
Yeah.
And I think you know, to make better tools, you actually have to realize that fact instead of trying to copy what static languages do. So that's what Dynadoc does. Now it's still mostly promise because the only way for it to really fulfill its goal is if people write code examples. And I don't know if my solution is the best, but I made a macro where you can define a code example for anything. And I'm already using it for my game library, my Clojure script game library called PlaySeal.js. And at least for my purposes, it works really well. It's literally like you write, kind of like when you write a spec, you know, and you put it right next to the function. You can do the same thing with a code example. Put it right next to the function, def example, you know, and then create, you know, provide a little example inside of there of the function with whatever arguments you want to provide. And Dynadoc will do the rest. It will actually display it inside of the appropriate page. It'll let you play around with it from the browser. And I mean, I think it got a good response. I put it on Reddit, got a long discussion. You know, most people were positive. There was one asshole, by the way, but that's okay.
I'm sorry about that.
It was you.
It wasn't me.
I mean, I love arguing with people on the internet because I grew up doing that.
You're the first guy.
Like I grew up on web forums, just like throwing mud, not even like polite arguments, just like
they'll just
real argument. And so I actually enjoy that. I just I hate how society expects us to do all these stupid things like be an adult all the time. And I sometimes I just forget that like I'm not that teenager anymore. Maybe I should rise above the fray, but no, it's okay. It's all right. The response was awesome though. Like I had all this great feedback about it. My next step is I'm going to try to make a central repository of code examples.
Right.
That you can put code examples for any library, Clojure core, anything, and you don't need it to be, you know, part of those libraries, right? Like it can be a separate thing that that anyone pulls into Dynadoc, and they just get the code examples for free. And I think that's great because it means like we don't need to get library authors to buy into this. We can just write the code examples for them, and everyone will get them.
Yeah.
So I haven't created it yet, but that's my next goal. Because if we could do that, then I think our documentation will be incredible.
I think I'm
so
like 1,000%.
For now,
just a second, Vijay. I'm 1,000% behind that because that's one of the things. I mean, I use Clojure docs all the time. Yeah, I mean, Clojure docs is superb. It's a great resource, but it's a total frustration to me that it's not live. You know, that it's not editable. That I can't actually play with it. It's ridiculous, actually. Like you say, given the power of Clojure and ClojureScript, okay, it came from an earlier age. I get that, but what you can do potentially is have a whole new generation of Clojure docs examples that are all completely live, they're all completely interactive. And I think that's going to be absolutely spectacular for people's first experience,
Yeah. Yeah. And I don't think there's a whole lot of chance that this is going to be integrated into Clojure docs. I think
it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. It can be something separate, it's fine.
Yeah. And also, and I didn't mention this before, but the primary way you use Dynadoc is you run it locally. I mean, you can create static docs. You can put it on GitHub pages. That's what most documentation generators do, right? They create these static HTML pages. You put them online, and that's good. That's important. But I actually think it's more useful to run it locally. You get documentation automatically for every dependency in your project. It's like a developer tool at that point. And I think it's a lot more powerful than creating static documentation that you put online, because obviously the Clojure examples are not going to be interactive in that case because you need a JVM. But running it locally inside of your project, it has access to every namespace, Clojure and ClojureScript. It can provide like full documentation for everything. So that's how I think people should look at it.
Okay, so is this like a bit like, there was I did a project a while ago where we were using like Swagger and that kind of stuff to give like interactive APIs. So you can have these REST APIs, you have the Swagger documentation, then you can have this like little like a kind of REPL, I guess, where you can try the API out. You can see what the results are coming back from it. But it's not a proper REPL. It's it's a bullshit thing. But this is like that kind of thing, but for local developers?
It is. Yeah, I haven't used Swagger very much, but I think that aspect is very similar. The fact that you can interact with it. But this works with every Clojure or ClojureScript function you can think of. It's not just APIs. You can make anything interactive. And the cool thing about ClojureScript examples is that you can make them visual. So when you go to the documentation page, you'll see the doc string, see the source code, but you'll also see optionally a little rectangle that displays, let's say it's a reagent component, can actually display it right there inside of the documentation page, and you can interact with it. And that's very powerful. It's similar looking to dev cards in that sense. You have the little rectangle, just like in dev cards. But the big benefit here is it's integrated into the documentation. Well, now you can put it online, and people can play with it there. And so it's like you get two for the price of one, basically. Documentation and interactive front end tool. It's like a combination of the two.
So just to be clear then, so it's like a way of explaining your code to fellow developers initially. That's what you're kind of gunning for. It's like this notion that I've got this namespace and I want you as a fellow developer to understand how to use it. And these examples explain that visually or technically to that fellow developer. Is that the goal of this project? Yeah.
I mean, you could say that's the goal of documentation in general.
Oh yeah, but this is a higher level, obviously. Yeah.
Yeah, and this just covers more ground because it can output static docs, just like old school documentation. So you can still put it online, let people read it, but then you also got this thing that you can run locally, which will just cover every dependency. Like I always thought it was stupid. Why, if you have a project with a whole bunch of Clojure dependencies, if you want to see the documentation for all of them, what do? You go to each of their individual GitHub pages, look for the docs. Clojure is a language that provides everything at runtime. So like we could just generate this stuff on your local machine and have a comprehensive documentation viewer for every library that you're using. Why do you need to go all over the place to find this stuff? You can just have it all in one place. So that's what I'm trying to do.
Yeah.
It up.
That is incredible. So just explain a bit more about how that works then. I mean, how does it, is it looking for, what is the runtime part of this? I mean, how do if I'm in Notepad, I'm a bit screwed, but I mean, if how do I get this thing working? Do I start up a local web server or what do I do?
No,
with
it's
these
just
things?
it's either a line again plugin or a
Okay.
boot task.
All
So
right.
whichever build tool you use, it's just a matter of one command. I'm a big fan of boot, but
Yeah.
obviously line again is still a majority. So I have both. And the line again plugin, well, both of them, they just spin up a local web server
Right.
to display the interface, but you don't need to worry about that. I mean, it does that undercover basically, and but the key is because it's a plugin, it has access to all your dependencies, so you don't need to tell it that, right? You just run it, and because it's inside of your project. In Clojure, all you have to do is call the function all.ns, and it'll just find every namespace in the entire class path. And Clojure script is a little bit more complicated, but it's a similar idea. It'll just find everything, and it'll just bring it all together and display it in the interface. And that's something that's just part of the Lisp tradition, making everything available at runtime like that.
Yeah, that seems to be like another part of your philosophy as well, is like having everything included in your project rather than having it as a separate tool. I think that's a really nice philosophy also, that you don't have to go anywhere else to pick up these things. You can just have it all there, readily available. So what does it look like when you're actually running this thing then? It runs at the web server, so you have to open it in a browser and then you have to just scan through it, like follow links essentially, like web links.
Yeah, exactly. It's a web interface. Like people were asking about integration with Emacs and IntelliJ. I don't have any plans for that, honestly.
Screw them, yeah.
Yeah, screw them.
Let them come to you, come on.
But it is integrated into light mode, right? So it's already there.
Exactly. Yeah. It's inside of.
It's like Google. He's privileging his own products. Yeah.
Oh hell yeah! This is vendor.
This is a vendor lock-in.
That's how it goes.
Exactly.
I just need to figure out how to make money from all this shit because I haven't yet.
That's a shame. That is a damn shame.
Oh, for sure. But it's a web server, so obviously you can access it with any web browser.
Yeah.
I just I don't know. My focus is more on making the tool itself and making it like really easy to use. I don't really use Emacs or IntelliJ very much, so
sure.
In my limited time, I haven't found the time to do direct integration, but I mean, you could still use it, of course. I mean, it's just, you're not going to see it directly in the editor or something.
So a quick question about like that. So coming back to the sort of def example thing. So how does it, like, let's say there's three things here. There's like the function, there's the spec, and there's the example. I mean, how do these three things all kind of interact or relate to each other? And how can we leverage one off the other, if you know what I mean?
Yeah, well, I mean, the spec integration is very basic right now.
Right.
And I need to do a lot better because right now it just displays the spec, but it doesn't even try to unroll it because you know how specs, you could have lots of layers of specs inside of specs. Well, if you just see the bare spec, you don't see a whole lot. You gotta unroll it. I haven't done that yet. So that is a plan. The example is displayed right next to it. The other thing is it might be useful to actually generate example data using specs. People have mentioned that on Reddit. I just haven't really thought about it that much. I don't know if it'll be practical, but spec is certainly important. I mean, it's a part of the documentation. If you have it, then Dynadoc should make use of it, at least displaying it. So that's like an ongoing thing to look into. But right now, it's kind of primitive how I use it.
Well, spec isn't even 1.0 yet, so I think you've got time.
Oh yeah.
It will be eventually.
Yeah, like I said, I'm excited about it. It's going to be huge. It already is huge,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
I mean, it's been really important. And for Dynadoc, I think there's so many possibilities for how we could use this in documentation.
Yeah.
And I think it's once again, because it's part of the runtime, and you have access to every spec at runtime, Dynadoc will have no problem leveraging it because it's running inside of your project. It already has all of your specs. It already has access to it. So that's going to be pretty cool.
I think what I like about what you're doing with like these the Dynadoc thing is you're saying, look, we need something which is kind of like well understood in terms of how to use these examples, because there's been lots of complaints in the Clojure community about documentation and examples and the what they call it, the doc string not being properly formatted, blah blah blah. But you just say, okay, look, just trash that. Just let's have a proper way to define an example rather than these arbitrary keywords that other people have talked about. Let's just have a proper way of doing it. And I think you're onto something there, because leveraging keywords in a doc string is just total bullshit. I mean, that's never going to be solid. It's never going to be right. It's never going to be properly applied or followed. Whereas if you've got a proper example model for doing this thing, and I really hope that this becomes a proper standard or a well-adopted standard in the community, because I think this is the kind of thing where, if we all get behind it, then we can really leverage the power of the actual language and the runtime systems rather than the power of the subsidiary tools.
Yeah, that's doc strings provide maybe some good context initially, but like I said in the past, a good code example is more powerful than a very lengthy doc string. It's much more direct. It also happens to be language neutral, essentially. Like someone who doesn't speak English can still probably learn from an example. It's so many good advantages to it, and it just fits for a language like Clojure. This is a dynamic language that wants to be evaled all the time. So let's do it. Let's eval. and the idea that I hate, and I've done this too, putting example code inside of a doc string. I just twitch at the thought of it.
Yeah.
It's because what can you do with that? You can do nothing.
It's a hit and hope, isn't it? It's a hit and hope. Hope that some tool in some distant galaxy picks it up and makes some sense of it. Well, fuck that,
Yeah, it's not data. If you're putting it in a string, I can't do anything with that.
Yeah.
So storing it as data, as Clojure data, which is what def example does, means that I can leverage it. I can eval it. I can do interesting things with it. So I like I said, I've put examples in doc strings before, so I'm guilty of this too. But we should stop it. Like start providing examples in a much more machine readable way.
Yeah.
And our documentation will be a lot better.
So we should say like data is examples is data. We need some kind of strapline here,
Yeah.
I haven't thought about the marketing part, but
data are examples.
Well, you're on
examples
defense, so it's already
right.
So we'll give you the necessary. Yeah, I don't speak English. Necessary boost in the marketing anyway.
Yeah.
So that'll be awesome. I think we are slightly above the time, unless we have any other topics that we want to talk about.
Yeah, but the time can go fuck itself as well. We got Zach on the show. I mean, this is we can't stop. We've spent a lot, and we're not letting him go. We all just hit pause, take a toilet break, and we come back and keep on rocking.
At this point, dear listener, you might be wondering, why am I still listening to these two idiots? Just like Zach. But fear not. As their sound overlord, I have decided that this will be an extended sanitary stop. The currying and cursing will continue next week in the second part of this episode.